What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of BDE. We got Mark back in the studio, but we're missing Kirk today. Kirk's out playing golf, sponsored Red M's golf tournament, sponsored the lunch, and I needed 4 players to go represent us, so deployed.
It was not
Kirk.
these 3.
He was the best choice.
So
He's already got some hardware or some crystal
so Kirk and Kevin's on our team. They went and played last week. I don't know what tournament it was.
It was a Schlumberger United Way tournament.
There you go.
Yeah.
And took 5th place out of like 40 teams. Not bad. Brought home some hardware. It's funny. They sent me a picture of it. I saw it. And then when I got here to the office, it's like this small. Like they made it look all big in the picture.
It was a fish picture.
That's exactly what it
He
was.
did win the long drive as well at 340 yards.
So, anyways,
that's a heck of a drive.
Yeah.
We'll see if they bring us back some more hot hardware from this tournament. But anyways, got a busy week this week. We got Empower Tuesday and Wednesday. So when this drops tomorrow, we'll
Just got my
be at
ticket.
Empower. Mark just got his ticket.
Listen.
Mark thought he had to buy a ticket. I don't pay Mark for anything around here.
I was about
to
say.
Shows up every week to do BDE, and he thought he had to buy a ticket. It's poor Mark.
No, so as you're listening to this in your car, just drive to 713 Music Center and come join us. Yeah. Convince them at the front desk you're a BDE listener.
We should have done like a special
free.
BDE episode at Empower.
Oh yeah,
We did one last year.
If we're smart, we'd do more things like that.
Yeah,
but we're not smart, so we don't do.
I think it's
like
more forward thinking.
Yeah.
Is our issue.
Yeah.
We tend to wait last second on things.
So what do we got this week? Did y'all see my video that I posted of
yesterday?
The illegal immigrants on I-10. It's kind of crazy. Some guy took it. So I have Jacob pull up the video, but essentially semi-truck full of illegal immigrants. I'm assuming they broke down. Surely they're not
the
doing
inside shoulder.
Yeah, inside shoulder, I-10, right at 610 and I-10 in the Heights, right in the middle of town. All these immigrants get out of the semi-truck and then run to a pickup truck and jump in the bed. And someone took the video and tagged me in it. And they said, "Hey, will you repost this? You have way more clout than I do. I want to get some views on it." And
somebody tagged me in it and said, "Do a podcast on this."
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. And so just kind of highlights, how crazy things are right now, because that's just happening right in the middle of, like, if you haven't been on I-10 in Houston, like, just let me, kind of set the scene for you. It's like the Thunderdome and just cars everywhere and right in the middle of the city. And so,
but were they driving an electric vehicle? Let's get to the.
It's funny. I saw a Tesla
stuff.
pass through in the video. I was going to tag Elon. Like, hey, maybe next time they'll use a Cybertruck.
Riding in a pickup like we used to do.
Yeah.
In the bed.
Yeah, I think that's against the law in Texas. Or is it okay if you're an adult?
No,
so
no, you can't ride in a fucking bed of a pickup truck.
Unrestrained. Of course, in a closed up trailer, unrestrained.
It's funny. I posted a picture a long time ago. I was out on some country. I used to live out in the country when my first son was born, and we drive around in the pickup, and I have him up in my lap, pretend like he's driving. And I posted on LinkedIn, and people were like, "It's unsafe to have your kid."
Yeah,
like, dude, I'm in a fucking dirt road. There's no cars around us. I would ride in the back of a pickup truck, but yeah, I think they frown upon it now, even in Texas.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
maybe not when you're running from Border Patrol and trying to get over illegally. Everything goes in that scenario. So yeah, but it was crazy. Zero Hedge retweeted it today. That's why it's going viral.
Yeah, no, it's crazy the implications of all this. Just, we have let in more people during the Biden administration than the population of 37 states.
Yeah,
and
this has been going on for.
And if you believe in democracy, right? Because we got to protect democracy. Literally, the population of more than 37 states. That's how the census doesn't break out illegal versus legal citizens, and that's how we apportion Congress, the Electoral College. This is a real thing.
Yeah, Julie's family lives down in Del Rio. And her grandfather, he passed away last year, but he's a 2-star Air Force general. And her aunt is a paramedic down there, works for EMS. And couple years ago. I was down there in Del Rio, and I was talking to her, and she's just telling me about how bad it was, and how often they were pulling bodies out of the water. And essentially, I think what was happening, the Lake Amstead down there is a man-made lake and has a dam that's controlled by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And I think what they're doing was draining the lake and elevating the river, making the river harder to cross, and ultimately killing people. And she was super sympathetic towards that, because she's like, this is dangerous for people crossing. Like, people are dying. She's like, we're the ones pulling their bodies out of the water. And so I was like, well, what are they doing with all of these camps and all of these people? And she's like, they're putting them on planes at the Air Force Base and flying them out. That was like 2 or 3 years ago. That blew my fucking mind when I heard
Flying
that.
to blue states.
It's like they're literally, they're literally taking them to the Air Force Base and putting them on C-130s and flying them out. And so
Elon Musk tweeted out something. I didn't get the name of the study, but it's disproportionate representative of illegal aliens that go to blue states, and it's all because of the census.
You know what's
and
funny though?
apportioning
Jake and I were
Congress.
just talking about this the other day. Is that every time we have an Uber driver here that's immigrated, and it doesn't matter if they're from South America, Central America, Pakistan, doesn't matter. They're super anti-Biden and Democrats and very pro-Trump and MAGA.
That's your selection bias. They chose to come to Texas where they would fit in.
I know, but it's just so funny. Like, I was like, I would love to have some harder data and statistics on people that immigrate over, whether it's legally or illegally.
It's first generation are 70% more likely to vote Democratic than Republican. I always said the greatest teacher I've ever had in my life was Doc C, my political science professor at Rice, Gilbert Cuthbertson. And his whole deal on every argument is you take the person's position that you're arguing against, you take it to its logical extreme, and then you cheerlead for it. And so he would have said the way the Republicans should have fought this battle was not getting up there making speeches about, we need to secure the border. He said you needed to be down on the border, handing them a Trump T-shirt and a Trump hat and $250 from the Republican Party as soon as they walked across, and set them free. And he said, his take was always, you attack from the left, as far over as you can get. So that would have been my strategy.
That's how you would have been.
Exactly. Welcome to America. Have a Republican T-shirt.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, because I think that the only way that it gets solved is by a show of force, to be honest. I mean, if you're talking about a true invasion from the South, which this isn't just, I'm super, sympathetic towards people that want to come here and have a better life. I've been on
one of the most horrific things America did, obviously behind slavery, was not accepting Jews when what was going on in Germany was happening. We were not. We let in less than the allocation we had from Europe. I'm not saying it was anti-Semitic, but it was very much isolation America, and we could have saved tons of lives.
I mean, the best testimonials that you'll hear about coming to America are those from naturalized citizens and their life story and reasons for being here, and comparing and contrasting.
Yeah. This one time I was on a rig, way down south on the border. I'm talking like 2 hours from the nearest blacktop, just out in the middle of the desert. And there's these two guys crossing the border, and they were hitchhiking on this dirt road. And I'm not going to fucking give you a ride, but, I did stop down the road and, throw a case of water out, because fucking, like, you're out in the middle of this, very extreme desert. And so it's like, have sympathy for people that want to escape, the oppression and poverty that they're living in. But there's a lot of bad people coming across the border as well. And
Chinese males that are 30 years old and in perfect health walking across our border right now is scary. And I mean that as no
what's happening?
Disrespect to Chinese people. I say communists.
Well, no,
would be a better way to put it.
No disrespect to Chinese people, but like what's happening in Oklahoma right now is that you have all of these weed farms, illegal weed farms that are being ran by Chinese nationals. And there was a story either last year or the year before that stands out to me, but it was several people killed execution style on their knees, just bullets to the back of the head.
Because it's gangs,
And,
Chinese
yeah,
gangs.
and it was, Chinese nationals that are doing these things. And so, it's and you look at Texas, I mean, Houston and Midland, Odessa are hubs for human trafficking and cartel activity. And I remember I tweeted about that a couple of years ago, and I don't want to call him out, but I'm going to call him out because it was a cool story. But Fraxon over on Twitter was like, "This is bullshit. You're saying that there's
Trash in Midland."
Yeah, trash in Midland." And this is when I started really respecting Fraxon, was he came back a day later, 2 days later, and he's like, "I want to apologize to Colin." He's like, "I had no idea that this was happening in our backyard. I talked to someone from Department of Homeland Security and just had no clue that this stuff was happening." And so it's just kind of scary when you think about it. Just, I mean, the arteries that run from Mexico up, Highway 59 into Houston, I-10 and I-20 out of Midland, Odessa. I mean, these are major hubs. And I always remember, sorry to rant here, but I remember when I first started working on a rig, Mexican dude that I worked with he was pretty connected with cartels. And back then, I think it was, I don't want to say which cartel because I can't remember. But anyways, one of them that skinned a guy's face off and then sewed it to a soccer ball. He told me that guy was living in Odessa that did that. It's like, is that the type of people that you want in Texas? So,
kind of the bottom line on it, and then Mark, you got to get us to Ceraweek. But the bottom line on it is we're catching people on the terrorist watch list coming across the border. And those are like the shitty terrorists because they got on the list.
Yeah.
Well, really good ones aren't on the list.
Well, this truck over on I-10 was full of, it looked like soil or dirt. And my thing is how does that get across Border Patrol? Like, that is not how you transport soil.
Dirt in an open air truck.
And like in this cargo truck. And like, you wouldn't think, it's like, hey, maybe there are people hiding in there. And so anyways, I just don't think highly of Border Patrol in the first place. Out of all my years and time spending on the Border Patrol, like, these are just movie watching dudes. They sit in their Ford Raptors and Tahoes on the sides of highways in the shade underneath some tree. And not to bash Border Patrol guys, because I'm sure their hands are just tied.
Yeah,
I'm sure that they're not allowed.
They have laws, and then they have what their bosses, the administration, tells them. So,
but just very little faith in things being done.
Ceraweek.
Let's talk about Ceraweek.
Why don't we start off with the characterization of Ceraweek as the Facebook relationship status that
Javier crushed it. So you want to do it? You want me to do it?
You got it right there written down.
Right. So Javier Bloss, good friend of the show, characterized energy transition as Facebook relationship statuses. 2020, hey, I'm single. 21, in a relationship. 22, engaged. 23, married. 24, it's complicated.
That's a great analogy.
That's the first thing I read this morning.
That was good stuff.
Yeah.
So the complicated relationship status, I think, has to do with the dominance of, oil and gas leadership commentary about a bit of the pragmatic reality of the prospect of investing and making very large capital investments in the things that they're doing. And I think it was kicked off. You guys talked about Nasser's comments last week from Aramco. Darren Woods basically said, look, this is really hard from a market standpoint because essentially nobody wants to pay for net zero. And that for private enterprises is I think the number one objective still is that they've got to have line of sight for not just a few years, but multiple decades on what the return profile is going to look like. And so I think just because of all of the dynamics that we've seen crop up lately with respect to this conversation and the trouble, at least in the equity markets, that the renewables players have experienced over the last couple of years, has just, created a bit more of a sobering pushback, if you will, on this whole conversation. There were protests outside. I think there was a funeral for the planet. That's really the only kind of opposition voice that I saw. There wasn't very much time spent on it.
I've always thought Ceraweek is a little highfalutin and the like, and I wasn't there. I've never been there because I can't afford the ticket. But at least reading from it, to your point, Mark, the things they talked about, demand for electricity. We spent $9.5 trillion on transition over the last 20 years. Kind of lack of financing for third world countries for energy infrastructure. Really commercialization of products. The increase in renewables. Hey, we're going to need a lot more transition. Was actually a very thoughtful discussion of what we need to be talking about if we're going to do this.
And what you raised there, the global South is getting more vocal at the table as well, and wanting, a primary voice in the decisions that are being made with respect to energy security, availability, affordability, things like that. So I just think the environment this year was pretty pronounced shift from what we've seen in the past 2 or 3 years coming out of COVID. And again, I think Javier's characterization of the relationship status was spot on.
I didn't say a lot of quotes. We talked about some of the quotes to open up Ceraweek last week on Monday from people like Darren Woods. The only quote that I saw since then, I haven't really been paying attention to Ceraweek, but they had Bill Gates speaking. And anyways, he was talking about Houston and the future of energy. And, he said that there's a heroic effort beginning here. I'm very excited about it, but we shouldn't underestimate how incredibly difficult the energy transition will be. I thought that was good commentary, very pragmatic, and also noted that the effort will be far more difficult than anything he had worked on at Microsoft. And so cool to see that Bill Gates understands that. And then also said that
he still can't put a microchip inside me, but I do like that quote.
Hey, we'll talk. We'll put that on the list. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. Anyways, I can't find the exact quote, but he made a comment that he sees Houston becoming the Silicon Valley of the energy industry, and that's been a big talking point for us here at Digital Wildcatters for the last 5 years. That this is energy capital of the world, and this is where all the innovation will come from. So it's good to hear Bill Gates alluding to that as well.
Yeah, and just one more. I capped it off last night. I got to the long form, the COBT episode on Veriton. Maynard had a sit down with Mike Wirth, the chairman and CEO of Chevron.
Damn, Maynard got Mike Wirth on?
For an hour. Hour plus,
on.
actually. I think it was an hour 9.
Well, it's not like I can go ask him after all the Antenna Ranch stuff I've done. So.
And he did,
Chevron likes me, though.
Yeah, Chevron likes you. They don't like me.
Toward the end of the discussion, he did broach the subject of what's going on between them and Exxon with regard to Hess and Guyana. So encourage people to get some time to watch that long form discussion, which I think was very good. But a couple of things as it relates to the topic at hand in the energy transition. I think Mike comes from he comes from an engineering background. He's a chemical engineer, looks at the world of an upstream dominant company with a pretty downstream margin focused oriented, or through that lens. And interesting to hear him talk about that perspective. The other thing he said about, as they look at through their new energies business, we have to look at each component of the value chain in everything we do. And when you get down into the weeds of the real complexities and technical hurdles it's a bit of a different risk assessment from an investment standpoint, because we're talking about at their scale, at any major scale, we're talking about hundreds of millions, north of $1 billion in some of these projects. The other thing that was interesting was comparing and contrasting things that have some government influence, whether it's subsidies from the IRA or one that has a developed market that's about 20 years old. The EPA started with the renewable fuel standards, which applies to biofuels blending in diesel and things like that. Made a really good point that the subsidies that are in place for the IRA to kick this off, some of those things are set to expire, at least the way the legislation is written. Some of those things are set to expire within a decade. Well, if we get started now with a major capital project, we're looking pretty close to the end of the runway by the time we get to operational, my words, not his, to operational startup.
Yeah.
RINs does have a mandate-driven objective or runway, but it's also developed. The RINs market is pretty deep and liquid, and there are standards within the RFS and credits related to that basically constitute what started out as a government mandate to essentially being handed off to a market, which a lot of the IRA stuff or the IRA subsidized stuff or any subsidy with no clear future at what the very long term looks like. How do we hand that off? Is there a developed market at that point in time when the subsidies go away? And Darren Wood said, things to that effect as well in his comments, is that we don't tend to think that purely subsidized business models are good for us. So
they're probably not good for anyone. I mean, I don't want to create any business that's dependent on subsidies or any types of credits, because you just brought up a good point. It's what happens 10 years from now, 5 years from now. And those types of things go away and you're left holding the bag. That's really hard to underwrite and plan for.
And as you've said many times, they're all agnostic in the way they generate returns. If it's in something else other than oil and gas and it makes sense from a risk standpoint, and there's a developed market, then it could be hydrogen, it could be renewables, it could be some things we haven't even talked about yet. But the demand to generate returns, and we've seen it with the other majors where the European majors, where they're starting to walk back some of their kind of aggressive posture on getting out in front of, I forget who said it, I think is the activist that is suing Shell. Why do you want to grow, or BP? Why do you want to grow this part of your portfolio at faster than the rate of society's demand growth for this stuff?
Yeah.
So,
I mean, it's impossible to know who's going to be elected and who's going to be, in effect, a lifetime appointment, a government bureaucrat making rules for your business. It's hard to plan. That's why what's really interesting, if you look in the history of the United States and you look at economic development type metrics, we always perform so well when we have divided government, because everybody knows the rules aren't going to change. Our rules may suck, but at least they're not going to change.
Yeah, gridlock's great for that.
Gridlock's great for that.
One thing to throw in here
Yep.
on kind of the subsidy risk and uncertainty. I don't know if you guys saw it. I sent it around late last week. The Georgia legislature has pulled or suspended sales tax incentives, or a sales tax exemption actually, for data center developers in Georgia to study the situation. My read of that was, in reading between the lines and maybe some of what was explicitly stated in the analysis, is that, the construction of these things provides quite a bit of job opportunity, but once the facilities are built, I think the long-term future of permanent employment, I don't know, you tell me, what does a data center require? It certainly doesn't require as much human labor as a new refinery or a chemical plant or auto manufacturing facility. The other theme that I think is at play here is what we've talked about in terms of what's going on in Virginia. We're going to build these big power generation additions. What does that look like from an opportunity standpoint in terms of being able to generate a return? What's it going to cost? Because I think the number of data centers that are on the table for a state like Georgia is a pretty large number, and that portends quite a bit of incremental power demand.
I read a rumor thing, maybe Reddit or somewhere on Twitter or something, that basically the behind the scenes is the power provider in Georgia saying we can't handle this. We're pushing up against our limits to be able to handle this. And they pressured the government to get rid of the sales tax thing, to buy it kind of some time to dig through that. And that people in the know in the Georgia legislature are going to local municipalities and say, hey, just because we got rid of the sales tax thing doesn't mean you can't offer it.
Right.
And so that's kind of a wild, who knows if that's true, but
Yeah,
it sounds believable, right?
yeah. I think that's a fair way to deal with it too. It's like getting rid of tax treatment or subsidies to try to get things to cool off so you can, it kind of gets out of hand. All of a sudden you have this rush of demand and you need to be able to slow it down and figure things out. So I think it's reasonable.
We'll go next to you. I got two things I want to close out Ceraweek with. One, the best quote I read from Ceraweek, Elnur Sultanov, who is Azerbaijan's deputy energy minister, said, let's cut to the chase. Every country is an oil country, either on the supply side or the demand side. Thought that was an epic line.
That's a pretty baller quote.
That's a very baller quote. And then Liz Bowman, who's at Williams now, she used to be at AXPC. And I got to meet her when I had the president of AXPC on the podcast. She actually put out a fashion report from Ceraweek. She said, bright colored suits, red, pink, bright blue, still totally in the mix. A lot of Kelly green, lots of leather, surprising for warm time in Houston. The honorable mentions were jumpers, plaid pantsuits with matching jackets, and even though there was a lot of walking, heels still remained dominant. So
I like that. Give some good fashion context of
thank you, Liz, for
what's funny? Last Saturday, I spent 2 hours Saturday morning learning about the mechanics of a sewing machine, which led to the history of sewing machines. And then ultimately,
good God, what is the color of the sky in your world? And keep going.
And then actually, which led to the impact that sewing machines have had on the environment and climate, because it's actually wild. Not that long ago, humans spent something like 20% plus of their income on garments, and now it's somewhere in the ballpark of 3 to 4% of our income, despite we have 20 times the amount of clothes now, and just the amount of clothes that are ending up in landfills. And so I want to hear Elizabeth Warren going after big sewing, which is Singer, because it is, but it shows you, it's like, would we agree that the automation of sewing is a good thing, like net positive for humanity? I would say so.
Sure.
Like, we have cheap and affordable clothing.
We need Somali pilots in a Tom Brady t-shirt, but yeah.
And there's negative externalities and second order effects that come from that, but like, it's ludicrous to be like, oh, we should ban sewing. Anyways, one other cool little tidbit on this is when they first came out with industrial sewing machines, they weren't each individually powered. They'd have a either a coal or steam powered engine in a facility, and all of these individual sewing machines would have a line that would run up to that.
Oh,
and
yeah.
so the second
I've seen those pictures.
The second that you would, plug in, it's just going. And so the skill and the ability of these seamstresses back then, it's like you didn't have your own little fucking power source and pedal where you could control it. It's like, nah, you just plugged in, and all of a sudden you're getting all this horsepower. So
then there were the manual ones where you had the pedal that you had to constantly keep going.
Yeah. What's interesting is my mother-in-law is she's a seamstress and sews, and so I went to use my knowledge on Julie. I was like, man, I learned, like, do you know how a sewing machine actually works? Like, talking about all the stitches. Julie already knew all of it. And I was like, damn, dude. I was like, we need to get Julie on here to talk about it. But it's interesting to see, like, I find a lot of similarities between that and computational power and things of this, like all the things that we're facing right now, we've already seen historically through the industrial revolution.
It's the Mark Andreessen point, is that no technology has made the world worse. It makes the world better. I mean, there are definitely trade-offs. And he even makes the case for the nuclear bomb. He said, us and the Soviets held each other at bay at least till today. And, until Russia went into Ukraine, kept a major land war from happening in Europe. So,
yeah, for sure. Speaking of technology, I'm going to throw a wrench in the run of the show, but you made a comment earlier about not getting the chip implanted. Video got released on Twitter or on X last week of the first Neuralink implant patient. His name's Nolan Arbaugh, 29-year-old. He was in a freak car accident that left him paralyzed from the neck down, so he's wheelchair bound, and got the Neuralink implanted. And the video was someone from Neuralink's team interviewing him, and while he's interviewing, Nolan is playing chess, and they'll show the camera on the computer screen, and he's moving around the cursor, the mouse, and moving around the pieces, all with his telepathy. He's doing it with his mind. He's not using a mouse. And what I found funny about this is the whole time Nolan's wearing an A&M hat. And so I made a post. I deleted it. I should have left it up, though. But it's like, breaking news: Elon Musk solves the dumb Aggie problem with Neuralink.
I saw that before you took it down.
And anyways, it's pretty inspiring technology there. And it kind of goes back, I think, did we talk about this on BDE last week, about the efficiency of human processing compared to AI? Can't remember if we talked about that on the show.
Relationship databases. We talked about that.
And, I think that we should do a deeper dive on this sometime on an episode, but really think about, I saw people talking about it. Like, you can actually mathematically determine, hey, what is the computational power for AI, per query or thought. And it actually takes a lot more energy than what a human does to produce a thought. And so I'd love to do a deep dive on,
because if you think
the
about
efficiency of a human versus AI.
Yeah.
If you think about it, I mean, that's what we did historically with horsepower. I mean, it was like, this does the work of so many horses, and we ought to shift that with AI. This does the work of so many humans.
Yeah. And, my personal belief is that things like Neuralink are the next step of evolution for humans. This is what keeps us from ultimately being killed off by AI, is that we integrate with AI. And so I know it's a very controversial topic, but it seems clear as day that that's where society ends up going.
In the podcast that Rogan did with Elon on Halloween of last year, the one where he tried to shoot the broadhead through the Cybertruck.
Oh yeah,
they get into this and talk.
Oh really? Did they talk about that?
Talk quite a bit. It spent quite a bit of time in an over 3-hour podcast.
I'll have to go listen. I never listened to that, but yeah, I mean, you look at it from either physical or mental capacity. I mean, we have these exoskeleton suits where you can lift more, do more from a mechanical perspective, and just makes sense that we'll have AI injected into us as well. And honestly, I'll do it. Like I said, I'd be the first one. Yeah, it's risky, but also if I can run circles around all you motherfuckers, I'll do it.
But let's be specific about what I said earlier in the podcast. I said Bill Gates could not put a microchip inside me. Musk, I'm willing to roll the dice with Musk. I think I trust him more than Bill.
I trust Musk more than I do anyone, which is probably fatal in its own.
We're gonna have to have Frack here put you in a pretzel and put it in himself.
Exactly.
All right. Sorry for the tangent, but I just
that was a good one.
That was interesting. So, anyways, what was next on the run of show?
What's next on run of show?
Well, I think in the area of subsidies and grants, DOE, well, the Biden administration announced, I think it was this morning when I first saw it, $6 billion over 33 projects in 20 states that are designed to mitigate emissions and invoke processes like one of the grants goes to Exxon for their Baytown refinery and chemical complex. I don't understand the process technology. I haven't seen any details on that, but it's essentially using hydrogen instead of natural gas to produce ethane. But the interesting one was $500 million of the $6 billion went to Century Aluminum to build a smelter, a primary aluminum smelter somewhere in the Mississippi River Basin. And looking at some of the history of what's happened to the U.S. Leadership in primary aluminum smelting, there were 23 primary smelters in 1993. There are currently 4 in the U.S. We were number 1 as recently as 2000. Globally, we've dropped to number 9. And so this, I think, in fact, the article that I read on Reuters said that this one project is going to double the primary aluminum smelting capacity in the U.S. So, part of this political message is we are doing things that are going to bring back industrial and manufacturing activity at a primary level in the U.S. It cuts across a lot of heavy industries: concrete, steel, or cement, steel, food, refining and chemicals, and primary metals. There was a steel subsidy with, I forget, in Ohio, but all of these things are kind of aimed at greenhouse gas mitigation or elimination in the processes. Let's see how this plays out. But $6 billion is a pretty big message in one grant announcement, I think. So,
because I mean, if CO2 is the problem, when you look at those industrial production type things that you listed out, that's more than cars plus jet travel, on CO2 emissions. It's about industrial stuff's like 10%, I think.
Yeah, Energy Secretary Granholm said that this will eliminate the equivalent of 3 million cars on the road in the U.S.
Yeah.
CO2 and greenhouse gas emissions.
Yeah, because cars, I think, are 6% of CO2 emissions and planes are 2%.
So take that, Ceraweek. We're going to come out and
look at that, a number.
Supercharge
I just
this
needed
thing.
Mark back to be inspired to
bounce
come up with a statistic.
Chuck, did you see this? We had that really bad storm like 4 nights ago. Hail and wind blowing in, like lightning like crazy. And anyways, 2,000 acre solar farm down there south of your house down in Needville just absolutely smashed by hail. Like every single solar panel wrecked. It's funny. It posted a picture of it from someone that was there and posted on LinkedIn. Someone's like, "Do you have a source for this?" I don't know if I believe it. Yeah, the source is someone fucking took a picture of it. Like, go drive down there. It's off of FM 1994. I was actually thinking about taking the drone and going down there and looking at it, and people are like, "Oh, well."
I probably know the landowner.
Yeah.
I mean, if I had to guess, I
from
probably
you.
went to high school with him.
And anyways, people are like, "Oh, it's not an issue, insurance." I'm like, "Yeah, but like it's never that easy." First off, and then 2, it's just like, pretty sizable. I don't know how many megawatts the farm is, but all of a sudden it's just offline. Well, that's got to be a pain.
Well, I mean, yeah, gas plants and nuclear facilities and coal plants are, they have to do weather protection and climate mitigation, but the engine of those facilities in terms of generating electricity is well protected inside a facility, a structure.
Yeah.
And that's just inherently impossible with wind turbines and solar panels.
Well, that's the guy that posted the picture. He's a big nuclear advocate. And then he's like, but
Nice.
the nuclear plant down the road stayed on during the storm. And so, I think that's interesting too. Like, I'd want to know what the implications are when it comes to like nameplate capacity, because all of a sudden you have this asset that can't generate. Are there any penalties for that, or
Well, you know, it's interesting. You start talking about solar stuff, and you start talking about pollen in the state of Texas. You have to wipe the solar panels down for them to run.
There's entire service businesses. That's what I made a meme, and Jacob, pull up this meme. The meme was, it's the strong Doge meme versus the weak Doge meme, and the strong Doge meme is oilfield service companies. It's like, yeah, we'll come frack your 20,000 foot lateral well. And the weak Doge meme is oilfield services. It's like, yeah, we'll come clean off your solar panels and cut the grass. Like, the service companies in oil and gas are much more.
But it's not an infrequent thing. It's I think 2 times a week, 3 times a week.
Yeah, you got to do it often. That's why I've seen like some technologies for like automated cleaners where it's on rail systems, and it'll.
This is the solution to the Houston homeless problem. All the squeegee guys around, we'll take you to Needville. We're gonna wipe down these panels.
Yeah, that's going to be the modern day. He got the prison right down there in Sugarland where they used to work the sugarcane fields. Yeah, get them scrubbing down.
That's the kind of window washing I could do. Said when I moved to Houston, was working up 50 floors, and I'm not real comfortable with freestanding heights. Airplanes and helicopters, fine. And then about the time I started with Exxon, there was actually a tragic accident. Some window washers on the Pennzoil towers fell because the lift cable broke, and it was pretty.
Jesus Christ, that'd be terrifying.
Not something I want to see.
Yeah, I would not be very good as a window washer.
No.
All right, are we election time, or did we have something else on the run of show?
Real quick, I only bring this up because the preamble to this latest Doomberg on thermal batteries started with a discussion of liquid death and, what the mission is and how attractive that was in their capital round. And I think resulted in a valuation of what, $1.3 billion.
Bucks. Yeah.
Let's put water in a can. That would be $1 billion, please.
This company,
I'm going to start a canned water called Frack Water.
Frack water.
These are like big boxes of carbon bricks, which are very stable. There's an abundance of carbon that you can mine to meet the addressable market needs. They can store, Andorra's technology can store up to 2,000 degrees Celsius.
That's hot.
Except for the very highest heat intensity industrial and manufacturing processes, takes care of a lot relative to combustion oriented thermal treating and cracking and things like that. And they've got aspirations to add distributable power capability to these thermal batteries.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the parts of the discussion, kind of the Achilles heel of that aspect of it is, there's a lot of inefficiency that comes into the system of going from heat to electricity and back.
Yeah.
And so, but the thermal storage is, attracted a lead round. The 2 leads in the round of capital, they raised $150 million.
Nice.
Between BlackRock and Temasek, the Singapore state investment firm. So,
that's interesting.
And the whole, just to make sure I understand it, you got these carbon bricks, you have some sort of, I'll call it off-peak power, either solar when prices go negative and you're going to shut in or whatever, and you just heat the bricks up and then you access it later.
Right.
Is that kind of okay?
Right. And that's one of the potential benefits is that you could raise the capacity factors of solar and wind when they're not generating into the grid and heat up these carbon bricks.
Yeah, I've seen, people have been working on battery storage that's, brick based for a long time, and have like all these like gravity storage designs and shit like that. And so it's always been something that's interesting to me, but never seemed like it was something that was actually viable, or at least no viable people working on it. And so,
what is
$150 million VC round is pretty.
Somebody thought it was viable.
Someone, no, that's stout.
But you know what I think it is for me is, as an investor, you sit there and you can tell yourself, hey, we're going to be way more volatile with electricity prices going forward, just as we add more renewables to the grid, all the issues we talk about here every week on BDE. So you tell yourself they're going to be spikes and you're going to make your money. But ultimately, with battery storage, you still cannot put in a baseline price and have it make money. Now, we've put in a lot of batteries. So, I mean, people are kind of betting on the come, but that I think has been the limiting factor to it.
That's right.
So.
Yeah. What was that company's name again?
Andorra. Andora.
Cool. I'll have to do a podcast with them sometime.
Yeah. Guys, come on. Okay, real quick, election stuff. Slovakia and Senegal had elections. Quite frankly, I couldn't bring myself to read about them, so I have nothing to report. But we do.
It's the level of news reporting here.
Yeah, I mean,
go dig into it yourself if you care.
Slovakia, But what we do have
We
coming
probably have
up
one
in
Slovakian
April,
listener. It's like, fuck these guys.
the 3 bot farms that listen to the podcast in Slovakia. Nothing but nice things to say about Senegal. But in April coming up, we have Kuwait on April 4th. April 10th, we have South Korea. And then this is going to be really interesting on April 19th, actually having parliamentary elections in India, which will be the largest election on the planet. There are almost 1 billion people eligible to vote in India. What's his face? Narendra Modi, I think, is the prime minister of India, is running for his 3rd term. The one thing I want to say here real quick, since we've got a little break in reporting on elections, that's kind of a theme that's starting to occur, and I'm going to get a little bit on my soapbox. When you look at the issues in the Indian election, it's unemployment. There's some Hindu nationalism stuff going on, but one of the big ones is political corruption. Every election we've talked about political corruption. And this is a fine, nuanced point, but I think it's really one of the things that's made America a different country on the planet is the political corruption we've been talking about in every other democracy. The winner uses the authority of the state to go after the person they just beat, and they throw them in jail. I think, Mark, you made the point of everybody runs for prime minister from jail.
Or exile.
Exactly. And our founding fathers spent a lot of time thinking through the Constitution, and the way they decided that we were going to handle political corruption was at the ballot box. So if you'll notice, the impeachment process, how to get rid of the president, other members of the executive, the judiciary, is a political process. The House of Representatives, the duly elected representatives of the citizens, has to bring impeachment charges. The Senate tries it. The Chief Justice of the Supreme Court sits in judgment of that. And that's how we've done everything. I mean, for all his bravado, Donald Trump, a thrower in jail, did nothing to Hillary Clinton when he got elected. And the reason I bring that up is it's a little scary seeing the power of the state being used to decide this election, because I don't think we've really done that in our past. I mean, historically, it's always been at the ballot box. We call each other bad names. We say horrific stuff. Impeachment's only happened to the president 4 times in the history of the United States. Even Richard Nixon had the good sense just to resign because what he had done is wrong. We didn't impeach Jackson as president back in the
Johnson
back
Johnson.
In the 1860s because a senator from the other side said, no, this is wrong. This is using a process that we shouldn't be doing for this. And so anyway,
but he ended up resigning. Johnson resigned.
Did he?
And then served in the House of Representatives.
I didn't think Johnson resigned.
I think he did resign.
Anyway, but the whole point is we take it very serious going after our political opponents. We do it at the ballot box. We don't use the power of the state, and I think that's what's made us different. And it's I hate to be naive. It's actually been shocking that literally every election we've talked about, someone's been in jail.
Yeah.
That's running.
And we call it in kind of the new lexicon around this. It's been termed lawfare.
Oh, fair.
So I'm going to go back to India, and this is a numbers question. You said that there were 1 billion thereabouts eligible to vote in India.
Yeah, just under.
Yeah, the country is 1.4 billion. What's their legal voting age?
I think it's 18.
Yeah. I have to look into that. That's interesting.
Yeah, which is very interesting.
All right, cool guys. Well, I gotta wrap it up because I gotta head off to Empower. Mark, good to have you back, man.
It's good to be back. Opening week of MLB regular season.
There you go.
Yankees coming into town for 4 against the Astros, and Ohtani is reading a statement at 4:45 Central, not taking questions.
We'll do an emergency podcast later in the week on it.
There you go.
Me and you. We'll drop it.
Cool.
Yeah.
I like it. All right, guys. We will catch y'all next week. Hope to see some of y'all at Empower this week. And make sure to share this episode with a friend if you enjoyed it. Catch you on the next one.